Seoul's National Intelligence Agency, briefing the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee on Monday, said that North Korea has inspected its military general political bureau for the first time in 2 decades, punishing the bureau's chief, Hwang Byung-seol, and deputy chief, Kim Won-hong, along with other military officers. The inspection was led by the vice chairman of the North's ruling Workers' Party, Choi Ryong-hae, and the reason given for the rare inspection of a key military organ was the bureau's, quote, impure attitude. The intelligence agency said that it has been watching the situation, but didn't specify what punishment had been taken by the regime. The General Political Bureau is an influential military institution, which deals with the crucial personnel management of other military branches. The punishment against Hwang Byung-seol came as a surprise, as he is one of the most powerful military figures in North Korea. Hwang took over the bureau in 2014, replacing Choi Ryong-hae, which raised speculation that Kim Jong-un might be keeping the two in check to ensure their loyalty. North Korea is widely known for punishing and killing high-level officials for supposed disloyalty. Since taking power in 2011, Kim Jong-un is believed to have executed more than 100 high-ranking military and party officials to ensure his followers' loyalty. Most widely known is the execution of Kim Jong-un's uncle Chang Song-taek soon after Kim Jong-un came to power.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is continuing his tour of factories and production facilities with his latest visit to a motor plant. Pyongyang state-run media, the Korean Central News Agency, reported on Tuesday that Kim visited the Seungni Motor Complex and was shown new truck models produced by the factory. He said the new 5-ton vehicles were proof that the hostile, desperate efforts to block the advancement of North Korea make the spirit of the Korean workers even stronger. His comments are in reference to the UN sanctions that the North Korean leader has railed against in recent weeks.
They were one of the countries designated as a state sponsor of terrorism, and President Bush took them off of the list in an effort to provide a carrot for the North Koreans to be more cooperative in their denuclearization. It did not work, and I think President Trump has decided it's time to reimpose it now to get their attention, and perhaps next time they negotiate, they'll appreciate the fact that we're not just going to give them carrots, that there are going to be some sticks involved in these negotiations too.
Will this change North Korea's posture, though? I mean, what if you are a state-sponsored terror? I mean, it's already the most alienated country on the planet. What would change with this designation, Senator?
I think what they're hoping to do is to recreate an opportunity where there are enough bad things happening to North Korea that they finally will come to the table and negotiate from a legitimate position. And then we can talk about perhaps removing some of the sanctions, perhaps removing them from the list of terror-sponsored states, if in fact they change their behavior. But as long as they are doing what they're doing, you might as well call it what it is. It's terrorism, and not try to pretty it up just in an effort to bring them to the bargaining table.
What is your sense of these ongoing tax talks, if we can switch gears? Right now, the president hopeful that he can get a deal by the end of the year. What do you think?
The status right now is that the Senate Finance Committee is writing the technical details of the bill that they passed out of the Finance Committee this last week so that it can be brought to the floor of the Senate at the beginning of next week. And the hope is that within that week, the Senate will approve the bill, and then the Senate and House committees can reconcile the two bills, the bill that passed the House and the bill that might pass the Senate. There are some differences between the bills, but it seems to me that they are all reconcilable. That is to say, you can probably reach some kind of a common understanding. What you have to be wary of is changing too much because of the delicate balance that was struck in the House to get the approval there, and the balance that will have to exist in the Senate, since Democrats will provide no votes whatsoever, and it'll all have to be done on the Republicans, and they only have 2 votes to spare.
And do you think the president compounds that situation, the tenure situation, by going after Senator Jeff Flake of your fine state, by responding to the senator's off-mic comments last week that he all but wants to be a no vote on tax cuts, saying he will be a no on tax cuts because his political career anyway is toast. What did you think of that?
Well, obviously that doesn't help. The object here is to add the votes until you have 50 or 51, and not to make people mad by calling them names. The fact of the matter is, Jeff Flake is a very principled senator, and his vote is going to be based on his idea of what's good for the country, not whether he's in a dispute with President Trump. And that's a good thing, because on balance, I think this bill is helpful to the economy and to the American people.
Do you think that Senator Flake would vote for this tax measure?
I haven't specifically asked him, but he is a conservative Republican who understands how the economy works, and he can appreciate the improvements that the bill will make, particularly for our corporations who are working very hard to compete with companies from other countries. And it's hard because our tax rate is so high. It's 35%, which is the highest among all of the industrialized nations. We need to get that down to the 20% range, which both of these bills do. And if we can, then our businesses can compete. And this isn't some big giveaway to corporations, as the Democrats like to demagogue. The beneficiaries of the tax cuts are the consumers of the businesses, the employees of the businesses, and the owners of the businesses. And those owners represent a lot of pension funds and others who invest in these stocks. So it's a benefit to the American people. And I hope that they're able to get that part of it.
The North Korean soldier who was shot more than 5 times by troops from his side of the border last week as he defected to the south has regained consciousness. On waking, he reportedly wanted to double check if it did in fact made it safely across and asked for a South Korean song. According to multiple local media outlet sources, he's stable enough to engage in communication, but the hospital treating the soldier points out he has not fully recovered and is at risk of pneumonia. Once it's determined stable, the National Intelligence Service and Defense Security Command will be conducting joint investigations into his identity and motives for defection. More details on the soldier's condition will be unveiled through a briefing to be held on Wednesday.
The State Department's kind of like a stuck record. They took North Korea off the list in 2008 to help induce North Korea to honor its commitments to denuclearize, commitments North Korea has made repeatedly over the past 25 years and repeatedly violated. So today, when somebody says, look, they were a terrorist state in 2008, they shouldn't have come off, we're going to put them back on for subsequent terrorist actions, the State Department can't handle it. And that's a real cultural problem, and it's not going to be solved simply by reorganization. I've said you need a cultural revolution at the State Department.
I want to play a little bit of what the Secretary of State had to say today about this decision.
It is very symbolic on the one hand, because it just points out again what a rogue regime this is and how brutal this regime is and how little they care for the value of human life. The practical effects may be limited, but hopefully we're closing off a few loopholes with this.
Okay, so he referred to it as symbolic. He said the practical impact may be limited. So what are the practical impacts of putting someone back on this list?
Well, it does authorize additional sanctions, but I think it was a huge mistake for the Bush administration in 2008 to take them off as a political inducement for the nuclear negotiations. If this list is to mean anything, it means you have to be objective. If a state meets the qualifications to be a state sponsor of terrorism, you put it on the list whether you want to negotiate with them or not, and let their behavior change, not ours. So I think to say to the rest of the world, this is a terrorist regime, and therefore we don't believe them when they make commitments, as they've repeatedly demonstrated for 25 years, to denuclearize, because they're not going to do it.
Okay, so I know that you think that the president is missing an opportunity because a lot of the top positions at the State Department are not filled, and in many cases there's not even a nominee for these positions. We have some of these numbers. Our crack research team broke this down for us. 96, the number of unfilled positions. These are top positions. 73, there's not even a nominee. There's only 2 awaiting nomination and 21 awaiting confirmation. 1 has failed. We know that a lot of the people that are there then are still holdovers from the last administration. Here's what the president has said about the pressure to fill those positions.
Let me tell you, the one that matters is me. I'm the only one that matters, because when it comes to it, that's what the policy is going to be.
All right, so how much does it matter that he get his senior position people-filled.
Well, I think it matters a lot. Obviously, the president makes all the most serious decisions, but every day at the State Department and every other government department, dozens, hundreds of decisions are being made at lower levels that affect and constrain his options when big decisions finally get to him. I'll just speak from all my years in the bureaucracy. If a president doesn't push his nominees down as far as he can to the assistant secretary level, the deputy assistant secretary level, it's very hard to get control of a large bureaucracy, especially one that's culturally hostile to a conservative Republican point of view. So there are maybe 200 or 300 significant political appointments at the State Department. The total staff of the State Department worldwide is 70,000. So you're not saving a lot of money by not putting these top people in, and what happens is their positions are filled on an acting basis by career people. And what have the career people been doing the last 8 years? Following Obama administration policies. That you don't have to believe in conspiracy theories, you just have to believe in human nature, that somebody's going to continue the policies they've been following until somebody else tells them to change.
And quickly, Secretary Tillerson has downplayed any talk of a rift between these two or that they're not on the same page. What's your sense of the relationship?
Well, I think it's always difficult when you have people who come from very different backgrounds, neither one of whom has been in the government before. But I do think it's critical in the national security area that everybody speak with one voice, and that means the interagency process, a boring phrase, but a critical process, has to work. And I don't think it has worked as well as it needs to in a threatening environment such as we live in internationally today.
It is no joke.
It doesn't change very much legally or strategically. It's an appropriate move. This is a rogue regime that does bad things to good people for bad reasons. And I think the Secretary Tillerson was very clear about that, and the President was very clear about that. But in terms of the practical effect, look, being on the list of state sponsors of terrorism means you can't get U.S. arms exports. Well, the United States hasn't exported any arms to North Korea ever. You can't get U.S. foreign aid, development aid, or political aid. Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon. You are subject to certain financial sanctions. Well, that's generally the case for most banks and most government officials in North Korea today. And then you're not allowed to get certain types of dual-use exports, dual-use commercial products that could be modified for military purposes. You can't send that stuff to North Korea anyway. So legally speaking, practically speaking, strategically speaking, it's not much of a change. Symbolically speaking, it's important because it reminds the North Koreans that they reneged on a deal that they got into with the Bush administration back in 2008. And the United States takes it seriously when people cheat on their deals.
Yeah, and you know, Trump's announcement opens North Korea to new U.S. sanctions as well. We have seen some of the toughest sanctions under the Trump administration, specifically also getting China involved in order to get the banks to put the close on North Korea. What else should we be seeing by adding North Korea to this list when it comes to sanctions, when it comes to legal liabilities?
So it used to be that North Korea was treated very much the same way as Iran. And then in the late days of the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, President Bush and Condoleezza Rice dialed that back a fair amount. So these days, you can't do business with the North Korean government. There are a lot of bad actors in North Korea, and it's worth that you can't do business with who are individually sanctioned. And it's also worth knowing that anybody that's owned or controlled by the government in North Korea, you can't do business with.
Yeah.
That has the effect of basically blocking out the entire country for most things, most of the time. If the Trump administration were to take things to the next level, they'd probably impose something like the territorial-based sanctions that we see on Iran, in which case there's no exception to the sanctions. You look at the country, the entire country is sanctioned, not just the government and certain individuals or institutions within it. That's the direction I'd expect the Trump administration to take. It would align the approach we use on North Korea from a sanctions perspective with the approach we've used on Iran. Right now, we're treating North Korea the same way we treat Syria, and it looks like the Trump administration is going to step that up.
Okay. And as you mentioned, you know, the move, mostly symbolic, likely isn't going to be preventing Kim Jong-un and his defiance in developing nuclear weapons. However, you know, does this set up the U.S. to position itself to take harsher measures against the rogue regime? We've talked much about how the president has met with the prime minister of Japan and met with South Korea and their leaders in order to put the pressure on North Korea. The missile defense program, for example, something that we need to amp up. Does that then give us the foot footprint, if you will, in order to do that, so we can protect these allies?
So redesignating North Korea as a state sponsor of terror is an incremental step in the right direction in terms of the coordination of political, economic, military, and diplomatic tools. But if you look at what's really going to change North Korea at the end of the day, it's going to be economic pressure from China, military pressure from the United States, and political changes within the country itself. Everything that we're doing to make sure that our allies have theater missile defense, that we're coordinated with Japan and South Korea to the extent that we can be on responding to aggression if it happens in the future. All of those things are the normal things that we'd expect any administration to do, and I'm glad to see the Trump administration doing them. But at the moment, we're sort of in a holding pattern with North Korea. You can turn up the pressure a lot, but unless you have economic pressure from China, military pressure from the United States, and political change within that country, you're not going to see this regime's behavior change very much, at least not in the near term.